Hello and welcome to episode 98 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined again by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hey everybody, we're back to our usual setup of recording over Discord, although we will be together again for Christmas time this year, so we'll be bringing you some more in-person podcasts at that time.
Yeah, maybe let's see, which one is this? We're going to be getting close. Maybe we could be we have to find a way to force it so that we are doing the 100th one face-to-face.
Well, we won't have to force it because this is number 98, so just two more from now and we'll be together.
Yes, I love it.
There you go. It's funny how things work out, huh?
It is. I like it.
All right. Well, and for those of you who may be listening to this podcast for the first time, this is College Football Throwdown, a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. We hear our father-son duo here to talk about our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, as well as what's going on the national side of college football for this week. So going back to the previous podcast, episode 97, we all gave our predictions in regards to the upcoming game against Purdue for Nebraska. I predicted Nebraska victory of 31-24. Dad, you predicted a victory for Nebraska of 42-35. And AJ was the naysayer, predicting that Purdue would win 38-27. But the final score, which I actually need to pull up here.
37-27.
37-27. There you go. So yeah, a little bit wider of a gap than any of us expected. Not by much, but we were given like 7-point, stats on the difference in the game.
That's right.
And hey, it was ugly at points, but we got our W. So that's what we said we really needed.
Exactly. And we saw moments that I would describe as the best football Nebraska has played all year. Arguably you could say there were moments in the Penn State first half that we played that well, but I feel like, that drive to start off the second half of this Purdue game was probably the best, most efficient, clean offensive drive, outside of maybe some first drive of the game type of things. But particularly since it happened in the beginning of the second half, which Nebraska has been awful, I feel like that was a really significant drive.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And to commemorate that drive, I have my shock top Belgian white. This is my last one from that particular trip I have here with me.
And I have a premium lager from Grain Belt, which is one of the brands that are under the umbrella of Shell Brewing Company from New Ulm, Minnesota. So that'll be mine. So here you go. So shock top, that's a cap. So you go ahead and do yours because it'll be a little pop.
There it is.
And then mine's gonna be a little louder here. There you go, because the old metal can. There you go. Cheers, my son.
All right, cheers. Virtual cheers. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But yes, it was fun. It was fun watching this game. Of course, Purdue was not playing their best. They made some mistakes right out of the gate, getting a punt blocked. And so we quickly went up to a 17-0 lead. That frankly could have been a 21-0 lead if we had just finished out that next drive that we had, which would really, I kind of felt it there a little bit like, ooh, if we had gotten that 21-point lead, I feel better. But 17 is, still a little too close for given how bad this team has played this year.
Yeah.
But
and it's about that killer instinct, right? Like if we are able to remain at a high efficiency level in situations like that and extend leads, then you bury a team. You destroy their will, right? And then the rest of the game is easy because now their mentality is totally shifted to, we can come back on this team to, well, this is going to be a rough day, and now we just got to hunker down and survive the rest of this thing and minimize the damage, right? and you want to get teams to where they're feeling that way. And we were on the verge of doing that, just like we were against Penn State earlier in the year, and we didn't finish the job. Now, last year, ironically, we're going to be talking about next week's game against Minnesota. Minnesota absolutely did that, right? They got on us early, and then they put their foot on our throats and crushed us.
Right.
And that's what you got to do when you have the opportunity. And Nebraska did not do that in this game. That's the step that we still have to demonstrate that we know how to take.
Right. Yeah. What I said to you after the game was over was that we've shown, ability to play like a good football team, in quarters and halves. We've generally been better in the first half and worse in the second half. And that kind of proved to be the case here again in this game, where we started making some more mistakes in the second half and nearly let them back into the game at points. And it's just, the difficulty of getting a team to play good, solid football for 4 quarters straight. It's
right.
That's a tricky thing to get together when you have a team that's lost so much, and we're still working on getting that psyche where we want it to be, kind of like we talked about on last podcast. But right. I think we said that nothing's better than winning in terms of helping the confidence of these players, and we got one today, and hopefully, or not today, but on Saturday, and hopefully we can carry that forward into the next game.
Right. And that's the other thing. It's the key here after the debacle that was the Illinois game, because now you look at that game and you say that's the real low water point of this season, was that Illinois game, because that was a game that was very winnable for us. We were as talented as the team across the field, but we were completely unprepared for that game, and as a result, we laid an egg. And so it's about learning how to win. It's about learning how to be a winner and how you prepare to be a winner, week in and week out. And those are things that Nebraska has lost. They don't know how to do that. Mm-hmm. So and it's not easy to find that. I mean, it really isn't, because you're asking people to do things and to commit and sacrifice at a level of preparation that they've never had to do in their lives. You're asking them to go someplace they've never been.
Right. Which is part of that whole transition from the high school level to the collegiate level in terms of football.
Right.
So interestingly, when you look at the stats for this game, it kind of shows a very large disparity on Purdue's side on the stats. In terms of rushing yards, they had 17 attempts for -2 yards. So pretty good there. On the other hand, they had 334 passing yards. So pretty much they weren't able to do crap against us in the run, but they kind of found some things in their passing game, although those numbers are a little bit inflated.
Yes.
You may remember they had one huge play in particular where 2 of our guys ran into each other, and their guy went all the way down the field for 86 yards for a touchdown. So if you take that out, then they're down to like 250, right? So that one play right there takes a good chunk out of their yards, because in general, aside from a couple of drives where they like had 6 plays and drove it down the field on us, which was not good to see. But in general, we went to a man-to-man coverage on their receivers, several of whom are very talented, as we pointed out in the preview for this game that we did last week. And our guys managed to cover them, and we saw a lot of good job by our secondary in this game, which was good to see for sure.
I would agree. I think it's the best game our secondary has had this season. That was a team that had some NFL caliber wide receivers, and we were able to shut them down. And I also agree that if you look at the stats and you take one single play away, right, that 86-yard touchdown, then you look at the stats from that perspective, that is a really good defensive effort. So, I don't know, I think they had 70-some snaps, 71, something like that. If you take away that one snap, we played the kind of football that would lead to all the things we were just talking about: consistent success, consistent, being able to build a lead and then blow somebody out. All those things happen if you don't give up that one play. If we don't give up that one play and instead we play like we did the other 70 plays of the game and we defend reasonably well and end up causing them to punt at some point in that drive, and they don't get points out of it, then that game is very different.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and it is interesting when you look at the stats. We had 71 plays for 364 yards. They had 64 for 332. So looking at that, they're actually quite close. But what that doesn't show is that, a number of our drives where we scored, we had really good field position. Like you'll remember the one where we were basically on their 20, to start the drive due to I think it was like a bad punt and then a penalty on Purdue that pushed us all the way
Right.
to that point. And in general,
Right.
Purdue definitely played sloppy. A lot of penalties. They were 11 for 126 at the end of the game.
And we had a lot too. So,
yeah.
I mean, it was just a very high penalized game. But you think about it, and some of ours, like I think we had 3 or 4, and I think we had 3, and they maybe had like 7, or we had 4 and they had 7 15-yard personal foul penalty.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I actually think we were doing generally pretty well, going into the third quarter on penalties. But you'll recall there was that fourth quarter drive of ours where there was a bunch of penalties and an injured player right on the kickoff. And from there were just penalty after penalty the whole drive. That one drive had 7 penalties across both teams.
Right. So. It was just awful display of football is what it is. But part of it was poor refereeing. Although I will say that most of those calls that they made were legitimate in that if you scrutinize in detail to the letter of the rules, like we did earlier in this season, where we got the rule book out and actually read the word for word stuff, they probably were accurate, right? But the reality is some of those holding calls, hell, they could call those on every damn play. So it's one of those things where I wish that football referees were able to do more of what basketball referees do, which is that they'll look at a grab or a hand placement, and on a basketball floor they'll judge it and say no advantage was gained, I'm not blowing my whistle. And then they'll look at that same situation, but they'll physically see an advantage gained by that leverage or by that hand placement, that they then say, okay, that's a foul. That's a foul,
Right.
And I wish that the referees on the football field had a little bit more of that mentality or flexibility or whatever you want to call it. But I think because of their distances away, the field of play in football is so much bigger than a basketball court. They're just not able to do that. Mm-hmm. And it leads to this kind of crap.
Right. And one thing I want to bring up to make sure we don't forget is talking about special teams. It was kind of a mixed day for us because on the one hand, we had one of our punts blocked, like Purdue had one of their punts blocked earlier in the game. And we still are showing some struggles on our kickoff return coverage and things like that. On the other hand, obviously we got the blocked punt on them, which was great early on in the game. And then Connor Culp, our field goal kicker, made 3 kicks, one of which was from 49 yards, which was his longest of the whole season.
Well, in his career.
His career, there you go. And it wasn't a pretty kick, but it made it through.
Exactly.
And that was important for me to see because he had shown throughout the season that he had consistency. I think he's only missed 1 kick the whole season. But most of that was from that, 30 to 40 yard kind of range. We hadn't really seen him do a distance kick. And that proved that he's got the leg for it. So that's something I'm happy to see because when you don't have a field goal kicker who you can rely on to be consistent, you really feel it. You don't realize how important that is until you don't have it.
Exactly, that's exactly right. But we still don't have crap for kickoffs, right? We're still struggling to figure out these short pooch kick things that we're doing. We're just giving up 10 yards oftentimes every damn kick, and it just doesn't make any sense. But we need a strong-legged kicker that can do the job.
But I would say, it was definitely very apparent in the last game. In this game, we definitely kicked out of the end zone, on a number of occasions. I think in some of those scenarios, they got it, like their guy caught it, near the edge of the end zone, and he could have, taken the knee, but he chose to take it out, and then our coverage, just kind of
Yeah.
sucked. Yeah, and he got, to the 30 or 35-yard line, let's say. So, I think that's less so on the kicker and more so on, our coverage
No,
team.
I disagree. And that's it's hard to see on a television broadcast sometimes, but it's all about height. It's one
Mm-hmm.
thing to say, okay, the kicker got it to the 2 yard line, but it's because when they've evaluated film, we don't have a kicker with a strong enough leg, and so when our kicker is kicking to kick it into the end zone, where the decision, right, the purpose is to kick it out of the end zone, they're not able to do it. Or when they do kick far enough, sometimes it's so low in trajectory and height that that the fielding team says, you know what, I'm going to take it out anyway because that ball's getting to me so fast because there wasn't enough height there to hang up there. So then they go, and that's why they get a good return. It's not all about the coverage being poor. It's about the fact that the kickoff did not get the height.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And I know that height is important, and that's something we have lacked in recent years for sure.
It is, and
Um,
we used it used to be a slam dunk. I mean, literally, I went 30 years, maybe 35 years of following Husker football, never having to worry about kicking. Like
mhm.
we always had a good to great to NFL caliber kicker and punter every year, and usually they were walk-ons. Usually they were kids out of Nebraska who just came into the program and just kind of got good coaching. We had a great special teams coach, Dan Young, for many years under Tom Osborne, and it was just phenomenal. And so you grew to just expect it. And now, holy cow, you realize the importance of it.
Yep. And one little bit I wanted to talk about, because we kind of talked about it during the game a little bit, was right near the end of the second half. You may remember that I believe Purdue was down in a scoring position and decided to go for it on a fourth down instead of kicking a field goal. And we managed to stop them on that fourth down and get the ball back with like 40 some seconds left on the clock, end of the second quarter. And Scott decided to be aggressive and basically still try to throw the ball and try to get something going. And I think at that point Purdue had just one timeout. It was either, I think that's
Yeah,
correct.
I think that's right. One timeout.
One
Yep.
timeout. And basically, we didn't end up getting anything done on that drive. Had to kick it. Purdue called the timeout to stop the clock, so they'd have 25 seconds left or whatever. And then we get a blocked punt, which is coming off of the previous punt that we had, which was, I think it was a short punt, or something weird happened there on our last
Yeah.
punt that I was like, okay, I'm a little bit nervous about that. And I know, and then because they got the ball, Purdue got the chance to drive it down, had a chance to score, couldn't score a touchdown, but kicked a field goal instead. So to shrink the lead from 17 to 14, leading to halftime, that was totally avoidable. Now I know you said that you liked that Scott was being aggressive in terms of like going for those pass plays, still trying to drive the knife in, as we'd say. But because of that previous punt that you knew, there might be a little bit of an issue there, and because of the fact that our quarterbacks haven't been able to prove the ability to, be good on the long pass, which is what you need to do, to get the ball down into field goal range, with 40 seconds left, at least a medium to long pass kind of range. I think that Scott should have gone for it on the first down. You can afford that on first down. And if you don't get it, then from that point, just run the ball twice. They only had one timeout. So at that point, we could have still ended the game, gone to halftime, 17 points up. So I think that was too big of a risk to take in that situation.
Well, number one, I think your memory of that sequence is a little different than mine. So we'll have to go back and watch that again. I don't think that Scott was necessarily aggressive in that sequence of three plays. What happened was he ran a play, which was basically a quarterback keeper for Adrian on first down. Adrian went sideways because there wasn't a hole necessarily for him to run up, tuck up into. and he ended up losing 2 or 3 yards on first down. So we were behind the chains from the very get go of that, and we end up throwing a little swing pass to Wandale Robinson, but it was like a third and 14 or something, third and 13, and he got like 8 or 9 on that little flip pass, and but it still ended up short of getting a first down. So I don't know that he was overly aggressive. It's not like he threw it deep. Maybe on second down he threw a pass, but that was because we had lost yardage on first down. But my argument would have been, I would have shared what your point is that, maybe you try on first down to throw the ball in that situation and try to pick up like 20 yards on a square in or something. And if you do, great. Then you go ahead and try to do what you're going to do. But if you don't get that 20-yard gain, then you hunker down and try to just get a first down and run out the clock. And we weren't able to do either. And we didn't run much time off the clock because of the pass choice. And I think they maybe used a timeout. So bottom line was they got the ball back with some real, good position.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree with you. I agree with your point though. It's that we need to not give up that situation. There was absolutely no excuse for the fact that we gave up points at the end of that half. It was great that we only gave up 3. Frankly, that was a great job by our defense to keep that to 3.
Yes, and especially coming off of them just on the previous drive, stopping them on 4th and short, when they decide to go for it to try to get the touchdown instead of kicking the field goal. So, our defense definitely pulled through for us there, which, to be frank, they've done that quite a lot this season. There's been a lot of red zone stops or goal line stands and things like that by the D this year. And the last thing I wanted to bring up in regards to this game was, of course, the quarterback situation. We brought in Adrian as our starter, which I think we all agreed that made sense, and he definitely played his best game of the season. He was 23 of 30 and throwing for 242 yards, and he ran it for 45. Still not showing, too much of that speed that we saw more from him in his first year, but he's fast enough to scramble out of situations when he needs to, and that came in clutch a couple times for us. But of course, on one of those running plays, he seemed to tweak his shoulder and he had to sit out for a whole series because of it. We brought in Luke McCaffrey for that series, who didn't really get much done. We had to punt it there. And so obviously it's good to see Adrian throwing it better, being more accurate, and that this is a step forward in his confidence. Hopefully he's getting this win. But if he's hurt now, us being snake bitten again, and he can't play in the upcoming game against Minnesota, that would be a big deal now, I think.
Oh, absolutely. It would be a huge deal for us. And yeah, whether it's an injury or COVID or whatever, if we don't have Adrian for this game against Minnesota, that diminishes our chances for success, because I think it ends up being a good thing. And frankly, the timing was probably about right, that Scott took him out, gave Luke an opportunity to demonstrate what he could do. Then we were able to kind of see firsthand probably what the coaches have been seeing all season, which was that Luke is an incredible athlete and can make some amazing individual plays, but he also lacks the kind of consistent accuracy and arm strength to do all the things that we want our quarterback to be able to do. Now, and in this game, I would say Adrian showed some of that. I mean, one of his scrambles, a scramble and then about a 25-yard throw on a rope to Wandale Robinson that ended up leading to a touchdown for us, was one of the best throws I've seen of Adrian Martinez since his freshman year. So I saw some glimmers of hope there for sure. And he's important to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was funny too. Once again, Wandale was our top receiver, even though he's, this short little guy, but he's just so damn fast. He had 114 yards via receptions in this game. So.
Yep. And he is obviously our probably our premier weapon although we have some other guys that are starting to develop, and if we can get some of those other threats to get to the point where coaches and defensive coordinators have to plan to anticipate. The other thing that was really important is just having having
Yeah.
Dedrick Mills available.
Yeah.
I mean, just having the threat of a guy who could at least put his nose in there and consistently get us 2 and 3 and 4 yards, which doesn't sound like much, but compared to when Dedrick wasn't in there, where we seem to be either getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage or even negative plays from the running back position. When we get Dedrick going, even if he's not making big plays, he's moving the chains. He's keeping us on schedule a little bit more, and it just opens up so much more of our offense.
Yep. I was going to make a point of that too. It was really great to have Mills back on the team here. And one thing I missed, we probably should have mentioned in our pregame with AJ last week, but that Bob Diaco is the defensive coordinator at Purdue. So there's a Nebraska connection there, which is kind of funny.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing is that I don't know that it had a huge bearing on the game because we're talking about different coaching staffs. It's not if the coaching staff at Nebraska was still the group that Diaco had coached with, then maybe that would give both him and them more familiarity with each other. But the fact is that Diaco didn't know Scott Frost and his staff at all, other than just maybe friendship, acquaintance type stuff. So not as big a deal. But Diaco, like he did at Nebraska, I think is struggling because I think his defensive philosophy and scheme simply does not work unless you have premier athletes.
Yep, seems to be that way. So looking ahead now to the Minnesota game next week, our last game of the regular season, as it were, at least, until the Big Ten figures out what they're doing with these crossover games. We're playing Minnesota, who's coming off of a little stint of COVID, so they didn't play last week.
The last 2 weeks.
Last 2 weeks, there you go. And so they missed a lot of practice time then as well. But it's sounding like that, though they have some players still out due to the 21 days, they feel like that they'll be able to play this weekend. However, their star wide receiver, Bateman, has decided to sit out the rest of the season, which is a big deal because he was their top guy on offense.
Right. Well, they have great running backs. They have some other wide receivers that are good, but Bateman is an NFL talent, right? And you can't when you're a team like Minnesota or Nebraska, where you maybe only have 3 or 4 guys that are NFL caliber on your team, and especially in the skill positions, you take one of those guys away, that has an impact on your team. And so I'm sure that with him out, that changes up what Nebraska's game plan is probably going to be, which, if he was playing, they would have had to been a little bit more concerned about the passing game. I would say now they probably have, especially as good as our defensive secondary played against Purdue, who also had NFL caliber wide receivers, that Nebraska's feeling pretty good about, okay, let's match up with these guys on the outside and focus on stopping their other real asset, which is their running back, Ibrahim, who's a stud and runs hard and gives 100% effort every time he touches the ball. And that scares me a great deal because our tackling has not been excellent this year. It's improved, but it's not excellent. Mm-hmm. And so I worry about him just kind of grinding out first downs against us. So depending on how many of their offensive linemen are affected by COVID and stuff, obviously will have an impact on that. But overall, I would say that this should lend itself to our defense being able to slow down their offense a little bit because their offense is quite potent. In fact, as I look at the stat matchup between Nebraska and Minnesota, most of the offensive categories are advantage Minnesota from a statistical standpoint. Most of the defensive categories advantage Nebraska. Minnesota's defense lost a lot from last year's team, and it shows. They're still a team that's got some youth and is struggling to find itself here in this COVID-shortened, weird season. So I would expect our offense, keyword should, be able to have some success against this defense. And the question is, can our defense slow them down enough for us to create some separation and maybe get a dominant victory? That would be a welcome watershed moment for Nebraska. I'm
Yeah.
not sure we're ready for that. I'm not sure we're there, but it sure would be nice if it happened.
Right. Yeah. There are 2 points I'm going to bring up here. One is that we saw, in terms of how good our secondary played in that game against Purdue, we saw Cam Taylor Britt had his best game of his career, probably, in terms of how many balls he was batting away and all that sort of stuff. So I
He was
hope.
just a phenomenal athlete. He made that tackle on fourth down. That guy was an absolute stud.
Yep. And I hope to see him perform to the same degree against Minnesota. That would be great to see. But what I was thinking about was our earlier victory against Penn State, right? And then we went into that Illinois game, which everybody was then projecting for us to win in terms of the stats guys and the gamblers and all that. And
Right, the spread.
right, we heard from the coaches that the team got kind of cocky, right, and didn't have a great week of practice, thinking, oh, we got this against this Illinois team, right, and we, that turned ugly fast. Now here we go, we've got another win, against Minnesota or Purdue, which is great. But I hope that the coaches have been able to point back to that Illinois game and say, all right, guys, you remember what happened last time, right? We can't let that happen here. This Minnesota team kicked our ass last year, but we're going to change that narrative. And, and this is in Lincoln, this is like senior day, right? So, all the more reason to play hard and get a W here, to help the season, end on a stronger note.
I totally agree with you, but I would kind of flip the script a little bit. I would say that I would be very critical of Nebraska's coaches for not having sensed that the team was not practicing well early in the week leading up to the Illinois game. That should have been on the coaches with a young team who hadn't enjoyed success, for them to right that ship way before it became the excuse after the fact to say, well, we didn't have a good week of practice. That's bullshit. And that's not on the kids at that point, because they didn't know any better. They didn't know what winning was like. The coaches know. Okay. And so I blame that on them. Now this week, after having experienced what they did at Illinois, now it's on the leaders of the players this week. Yes, the coaches have got to call it out, but even more so, I would argue that it's the players now this week that have got to make sure that they're holding people accountable for their effort and their focus and lock it in. And the other thing that you got to keep in mind that's being a little bit of a help here is school's over. These kids are not going to school right now.
Right.
So they're just practicing. That's all they're doing is practicing and hanging out. So they can be really locked in. They can be watching some more film. They can be doing all the right things, hopefully, to prepare for this game, knowing that this might very well be the last. Because, like you said, going at the beginning of the podcast, we don't know what's going to happen with ninth week, right? It's supposed to be this matchup thing, but shit, they don't even know. Right now, it sounds like there's going to be some hodgepodge of, there's a few dome stadiums that they're going to get for, of course, the Indianapolis one for the conference championship game, and maybe the 2 versus 2 and the 3 versus 3 are going to be in these neutral site dome stadiums. But then the remainder of them are going to maybe end up being on campuses and played out, and how they're going to pick who gets the home field and who doesn't is anybody's guess. The fact that they have no clue is another example of the piss poor leadership that has been going on in the Big Ten since this whole COVID thing started.
Yeah. You brought up a good point, though, that, it's easy to forget in these weird times that we're in right now. But, it's not normal for the teams to be playing this late into November. Usually, like, we're done by now and we're just waiting for the conference championship games and the bowl games later on and, that sort of thing.
Right.
So,
in fact, that typically the conference championship game would have happened last weekend.
Exactly.
Right? It's the first weekend of December would have been the conference championship game, and we would be done with the season.
Right. Yeah. So this is a bit of a different situation for everybody involved.
Yes.
So looking ahead to that Minnesota game, I know that Purdue has apparently figured out that they have some players with COVID and they won't be playing their game this upcoming weekend. And so there are some concerns and rumors that some of our guys may have gotten COVID as well. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But presuming for the moment that we don't lose anybody significant to COVID, but with a potentially injured Adrian Martinez, what do you think our chances are going into this Minnesota game in terms of a prediction?
Okay, well, and I'm going to reference back to the stats matchup here a little bit in my assessment here, but I, I actually think that we have some real positive momentum from the Purdue victory. I think some kids learned a few things at this point in the season. We've been practicing pretty consistently. I think the coaches, to their credit, even in the midst of all the criticism that they receive, I think the coaches have been consistently continuing the message. The guys who are locked in to say this is what we got to do, and it's starting to take hold. I think they've all of them, offensive line, defensive line, all the different groups have tightened up their rotations. Meaning, I think we're playing fewer players now, and we're getting more reps for those players, so that their ability to understand what's going on and their ability to execute the game plan is locked in a little better than it was earlier in the season when we were still experimenting and trying a variety of different players and stuff. So all that lends itself to us. I would say from the Minnesota standpoint, they basically took a week and a half, let's say, off. They started practicing, I think, on either Saturday or Sunday of this past week. So they've been practicing for a little while, but for the most part, they skipped 2 weeks, right? And that is tough because they didn't even have team activities, which means they weren't even lifting weights or anything. And this is kind of potentially the last game of the year. So I think Minnesota's got a challenge in front of them. They got to get their guys in shape, mentally focused, and ready to execute at a high level. And I think the Wisconsin result of last weekend, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is an indication of what happens when you start having all this, up and down stuff of COVID lockdowns, right? So I just think an awful lot of stuff is going our favor. The concerns I have that goes back to the comparison. There's interesting stats here for the year. Minnesota's in the top 15 in fewest penalties. We are of course 95th. So penalties, penalty yards, and time of possession, they're fourth in the country. Minnesota is fourth in the country in average time of possession. And that's because they have a great running game. And they had Bateman and some other wide receivers who were good, whose names I can't state to you. But between having that NFL threat in Bateman and then some other solid receivers and solid tight ends and a good offensive line, they have been able to control their football, right? And that's something that scares the heck out of me because we're not good at that. We're 106th in the country in time of possession. So if there's some little hints there that this could be a little bit of a tough matchup for us from the standpoint of just what their strengths are versus what our strengths are. But I think that we have a lot of advantages. We've been playing where we've got positive momentum. So I'm going to predict we're going to win the football game. And I'm going to go ahead and be optimistic and say it's home game. It's senior day. We're starting to put it together. I think they may be having a little bit more of a challenge to get their kids with the right mental attitude. So I think we win, and I'm hopeful that we win by more than the spread. The spread's around 10, 11 points right now. So I'm going to say we win by 17 points, right? So now I got to come up with the score. I think they're going to score some points on us because of their running game, particularly. So I'm going to say it's going to be somewhat similar to the
Purdue
game, except we're going to score a few more points. So I'm going to say Minnesota 24, and then how do you add 17 to that? So
41.
Let's say 42-24.
42-24. Okay, I like it. And one point I'm going to make on that front is obviously Purdue's running game isn't to the same level of caliber as what we're going to see out of Minnesota. But
Correct.
I was impressed by what I saw from our defensive line. Even when they were passing it, we were consistently contracting the pocket, and also seeing guys just in general, like they were coming off of their blocks to get the tackle on, passing receiver or running back and things like that. So those things give me hope that we'll, not that we'll be able to shut down the running game to the extent we did against Purdue. That's just unreasonable. But I do think we'll be able to slow them down. The bigger question for me is, I think a lot really does hinge on Adrian. Even if he does play, we know, he's clearly was hurt. We saw that in the game. So that's going to make him a little more tentative to run. You'll recall in the fourth quarter when we were making our last drive that got us that field goal, he slid on a long, third down or something, or second down.
Yes.
When, if he had just plowed forward a bit, he probably would have gotten the first. But, but I understand that he slid because that right shoulder really was hurting him. So I'm going to predict that we do win, but I think I'm going to predict that Adrian is going to, not be able to play as well as he did against Purdue because of that injury. And so it's going to be a nail biter. But I'm going to say Nebraska wins. Let's say it's, let's go with 35 Nebraska, 28 Minnesota.
Okay. So 7-point victory. You know what? I like your score. It's very well thought out, and I didn't really take into consideration the Martinez thing. I'm presuming that was just a bruised shoulder kind of situation because of the way he fell on it. It was just him landing on his shoulder,
right?
And is not something major. It was just a discomfort thing. And by the end of this week, I'm expecting him to be basically 100% and ready to play. Now, if it turns out that they can't play because of an injury or COVID or whatever, then obviously these predictions on our part are not going to be what is reality. But boy, this would be a huge victory also, Alex. I think, especially if we can win like I'm predicting, where we get a really solid victory, because now you got a 2-game winning streak. Now you're probably looking in a situation where we would be tied for like third in the division with about 3 other teams, and we might be in a position to play a pretty decent opponent then in this crossover matchup the following week, right?
Right.
Where we would end up playing Penn State again, or somebody like that, maybe Indiana even.
Yeah. Indiana would surely be ranked above us.
You're right. That wouldn't be Indiana. It would be Penn State or
Rutgers,
Maryland or Rutgers. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which are all pretty damn talented.
I certainly hope if that did happen, we wouldn't get paired up with Penn State again for the rematch, just because A, everybody's already seen that, and B, I think we would lose if we played them again, just because of how those things tend to go. You mentioned Wisconsin earlier, who obviously has had a very difficult season in terms of having to take games off because of COVID and things like that. And we gave our predictions about that Indiana game because we knew, as of when we did the last podcast, that Indiana's starting quarterback was hurt and wasn't going to play. So we all predicted that Wisconsin would win. I said 38-24. You said 35-21. And AJ said 28-21, all for Wisconsin. But the final game ended up being something quite different. And Indiana won 14-6, with Wisconsin just scoring 2 field goals.
And this is with Indiana's backup quarterback because their starter tore his ACL and is out for the season. Amazing.
Yep. And yeah, I think there were 2 turnovers by Wisconsin that were significant. But even with that, I've watched the highlights afterwards. And in the fourth quarter, they had a drive going, and the guy, it was interesting. The quarterback had a low snap, so he had to kind of bend down to get the ball. And then he threw it to this guy in the end zone, and the receiver had the Indiana guy beat, but because the ball came a little late, he just kind of ran out of room in that corner of the end zone, and the ball was kind of batted away. But if that Wisconsin quarterback had gotten that off just like half a second earlier, they might have gotten touchdown there. They go for two, tie up the ball game, or in a different scenario, but that didn't happen. And Indiana has continued to have this amazing season of theirs.
Right, exactly. And it's a little bit of a head scratcher for Wisconsin, other than the fact that you got to look at Wisconsin and realize they've been up and down. They've missed at two different times. They've missed, a significant time because of COVID. So they haven't been able to practice regularly. And then they've had players out because of the COVID 21-day thing. So they just aren't the team that they could have been. So, I kind of get why Wisconsin didn't play well. It'll be interesting to see how Wisconsin plays this week.
Mm-hmm.
They play Iowa.
They do play Iowa. Yep, that'll be an interesting matchup. And then the other big upset that I want to talk about was BYU, who is getting some talk on the national side of things because they were undefeated up to this point. Had to play Coastal Carolina, and Coastal Carolina managed to pull out the upset, 22-17. Also another scenario where BYU was driving it, late and threw like a Hail Mary pass that the guy caught at like the 1 yard line. Like, it was real close.
Yes.
Right there at the end.
And it's interesting. The head coach at Coastal Coastal Carolina's program was literally just getting started a few years ago, maybe.
Oh, really?
8 years ago, something like that. And the head coach there, Joe Moglia, I think is his last name, or Moglia, is actually got Nebraska roots. He was a GA. So here's the thing. He was the CEO of a major company. I'm going to say it was a loan company. I don't know if it was Ameritrade, but I think it was Ameritrade. The company Ameritrade.
Right.
He was one of the founders of that company. So he was a multi-millionaire. And then he stepped away from that role, retired, if you will. I think he was CEO. And he had a lifetime passion of college football, and wanted to be a coach. And he became a GA, a graduate assistant under Bo Pelini at Nebraska. And he was a graduate assistant at there. But because of his executive background and everything like that, he obviously had a lot of the skills to be a leader and to be a head coach, right? He understands how to run an organization. So then, Coastal Carolina starting a football program and decides that they want to, take a flyer on this guy because he was really good. He was highly respected within Nebraska's program as a GA because he just came with so many leadership skills.
Right.
And he was given the job. He took the job. And so he's gone from CEO of a Fortune, 1,000 company, certainly, but I don't know, but certainly multimillionaire, very successful businessman, probably in his late 40s, early 50s at the time. And boom, he becomes the head coach of a fledgling football program. And now here they are kicking ass, less than a decade later under his leadership. So kind of cool. And his origins are from Nebraska.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, once again, I just watched the highlights of the, game, although it sounds like it was a really thrilling game to watch live. But Coastal Carolina, they have a little running back guy. He reminds me of Wan'Dale Robinson, except even faster. Like this guy has some serious speed just from watching the highlights.
Yeah.
And he ran all over BYU in this game. So he's somebody
awesome
to watch out for sure.
Yeah, that's cool.
So there are a couple other upsets in week 15, but I think we're going to transition into looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, because there's a whole story that is now developed in regards to that. Of course, there's the game that is very familiar to us coming from Michigan, the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry game. And now there have been concerns about that game potentially being canceled because of some COVID concerns on the Michigan side of things for a while now. And it seems that was indeed the case because the game has now been canceled, which is causing a whole situation at Big Ten HQ, and with all the media outlets talking about it now, because Ohio State now has not been able to play 3 separate games because of COVID, and so does not have the requisite games to play in the conference championship game according to the Big Ten rules. And also according to those Big Ten rules, they can't reschedule an opponent last minute. They got to just sit it out and deal with it, which was, of course, the situation that Nebraska was in earlier this year when we tried to schedule in our replacement for Wisconsin, and that wasn't able to go through. So now the question is, will the Big Ten change its mind because the Golden Boy is in trouble, and kind of show their hypocrisy, as it were?
Right. Well, I mean, I hope they do. I hope they demonstrate finally the flexibility that they should have had up front. I mean, the fact that this just proves that we were right, and it does. It's so great that you're starting to see a few national commentators and pundits and folks acknowledge that, the statements that came out of the University of Nebraska's leadership way early on in this thing, so many of them have come to complete fruition in terms of the philosophy that we took and approached, and how we got raked over the coals by some media members and by our own conference, where we were this, kick them out of the conference mentality. These guys are rebels, and it turns out we were right. So, but rather than saying, "Oh, you can't do this, Big Ten, because you wouldn't let us do it," I don't feel that that's a good idea for Nebraska, its fans, or its media to take that approach. I think what we need to acknowledge is, hey, guys, the great news is we've been proven right pretty much across the board on this deal, whether it has to do with having a football season at all, and our push to have football, and what role we played in that, as well as the whole, debacle of the first canceled game where Wisconsin had to cancel because of COVID, and we attempted to get an alternative, game in, which I think would have been huge for us if we had been able to get that alternative game. I'm not talking about playing Wisconsin. I'm talking about playing an alternative team. That would have been huge for us, and I think would have changed the outcome almost certainly of the Northwestern game, if not more than that. And so I want Ohio State to have a game this weekend. I would very much be happy with whatever the Big Ten was willing to do to help them have a game. Now, the problem is that they have another opponent now, Indiana. So there's 2 Big Ten East teams that are available to play each other this weekend, but they've already played. So the question is it more advantageous for the Big Ten to have Ohio State and Indiana play each other and give Ohio State and Indiana a chance to have another game, let their players play and compete, or is it better for them to simply stand on the sidelines and then just waive the six game requirement that they put? I mean, they could easily just wave the magic wand, and decide that, you know what, we're gonna change our minds about the six game requirement due to extenuating circumstances of COVID, and allow Ohio State at 5-0 to be the Big Ten East champion and play Northwestern in the conference championship game. That would be the easy choice.
Right.
And then they get their 6th game in, and I think a 6-0 Ohio State, who has won dominantly in almost every game, who has a phenomenal quarterback, and there's no reason that you wouldn't consider them good. The only problem is you're comparing them to a one-loss Texas A&M team that has played 10 or 11 games.
Right.
And so who's the more deserving team? Is it Ohio State or is it Texas A&M?
Right. Yep. And there was a Sports Illustrator article, which I read earlier, and it was quite good. And there's 2 quotes I'm going to pull from it. This one is from a Big Ten administrator who texted this apparently today to this reporter. I mean, we did announce a schedule in August and cancel the season 5 days later and then bring it back. So to dig in the heels on this one seems a bit weird. And with the ACC saying Notre Dame and Clemson aren't playing this week to avoid any upsets, it seems precedent is that we should all adjust on the fly. So to your point, basically, this guy's saying that
Be flexible.
be flexible, right?
Yes, and that's been the message of Nebraska. Be
Right.
flexible, and even when they were arguing for their own benefit, obviously to be able to get that game during the Wisconsin week, um, we were saying, hey, we were projecting it to, hey, this is going to happen again. This is just the first time, but it's going to happen again in the season. We were predicting that, and we were right.
Right.
And why couldn't you have seen that? Everybody and their brother knew that.
Right. The thing is, if they do change the rules and let them play in the championship game, what do you say if you're Indiana, who admittedly played Ohio State and lost pretty decisively, but has won all their other games, and if this rule isn't changed, then they'll be the one to play in that championship game. So you're basically robbing them of their opportunity based on the current rules. So if I'm an Indiana fan, I'd be calling foul for sure.
Oh, absolutely, because you're changing the rules very late in the game here, right? And Indiana has done what they needed to do. But and so if you're going to take that approach, then Indiana, this is your two choices. Either because you're available, because Purdue's now out, right? Indiana, you have to you have to play Ohio State again. You want to play for the Big Ten championship as Big Ten East champions, then beat Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you don't, then accept the fact that we're going to pick Ohio State over you, even though you have played more games. You're seven, you have 7 games in, and they only have 5. Right. So I think those are the two choices you give Indiana. I don't think Indiana can cry foul because of the change in the rule, because they have a path.
Right.
If you're hung up about that, then demand that the game be played and that you be given the opportunity for a rematch with Ohio State. I'm totally okay with that. And if that's what they want, then I say Ohio State needs to be ready to say, yeah, absolutely, let's strap it up.
Yep. Well, I hadn't realized that Indiana was available, so that does kind of play out in a way that I think Indiana, if they're given those options, they would definitely take it. Like, we get a second chance at Ohio State and still have a chance to play for our shot at the title.
Right. And I'm saying that because I know Purdue. I don't know if that's been formally canceled yet, but there's a lot of indications that it will be.
Right. And the other quote I wanted to quote from this, just because I thought it was well written, is it says up here at the top, welcome back for the latest episode of College Athletics Surprise Hit Series of 2020. What the hell will the Big Ten do now? The Big Ten has had it all. Shocking plot twists, shoddy leadership, anger, waffling, petulance, pettiness, selfishness, near constant discord, and a succession of plans doomed to fail.
Exactly.
Is that an apt description or what?
It absolutely is. I mean, their leadership has been horrible, and I'm telling you, and that's where I think Nebraska shines as the shining star of logic and reasonableness through this whole deal, from the very beginning of we want to play through the, hey, we know that now that we have these rules, we need to be working towards alternatives that allow us to play however we can play on the weeks where we get canceled, because it's going to happen. And in each case, the formal statements from the university leadership were very clear that this wasn't about just, oh, we want this because Nebraska wants it. It was, we want this because it's the right thing to do for our student athletes who've been busting their ass to prepare for a season. It's the right thing to do in terms of what we can do in terms of our television partners. And hey, it's going to be happening again. And if you want to get somebody in the playoff, you need to know that this is going to happen. And all that seemed obvious to the leadership at Nebraska, and yet it seemed to elude the leadership at Big Ten headquarters.
Right. So the final thing I want to discuss is, let's say that the Big Ten sticks to their guns and Ohio State doesn't play anybody, and it's Indiana Northwestern for the championship game in the Big Ten. But Ohio State is still 5-0 or whatever they are,
5-0,
right? And and then, like you said, the debate then comes down to Ohio State versus Texas A&M for getting that 4th spot into the playoff, presuming things play out as we'd expect otherwise.
Right. Then I believe it would be very hard for them to not allow Texas A&M to be in, and for Ohio State to be given the invite to whatever bowl game they can get to. Sorry, Charlie,
Right.
because I think the evidence, the preponderance of evidence is that Texas A&M has played, four, maybe five more football games more than Ohio State. They've played in the toughest conference in the country, in the SEC, and their only loss is to the number one team in the country.
Right.
Right.
I
So
I agree with you, and I think if that's how the situation played out, then that's what I would like to see for the principle of it. Since Ohio
yeah,
State's not a conference champion and they have
exactly.
played less games, but
Yep.
I think we could also admit that from the eye test and just kind of knowing the talent on both teams, Ohio State is the more talented team, and uh, probably may be able to compete better, with those other teams that will be in the playoff than Texas A&M. But I think you have to give, even though our biases and what we've seen on the field indicates us that way. I think you have to stick by your guns of results and games are what matter the most.
Okay. So if that's true, then this is the thing. Then we have to revisit what Nebraska requested, because the opportunity is there. You know what? If you're Ohio State, and if that's what the Big Ten's telling you, then Ohio State better be on the phone with Texas A&M. For historical reference, Texas A&M is not playing this weekend because of COVID from their opponent. I don't know who they were scheduled to play. I don't know their schedule. I just know they're available. So Texas A&M and Ohio State could play sometime soon. They could maybe play on Sunday or Monday if they need a couple of other days to coordinate the logistics and to give the teams some time to do some legitimate preparation for that opponent. But they could find a way to have a game sometime close to this weekend between those two teams to not only determine what you just said. You said, well, it's kind of obvious that Ohio State has more talent than A&M. No, not to everybody else. Let's prove it on the field. And I think Ohio State would be absolutely okay with proving that if they're given that opportunity. The question is the Big Ten going to put their head in the sand like they've done this whole goddamn time, or are they going to finally demonstrate some flexibility and understand that they have to be flexible in this circumstance and open the door to either allowing Ohio State to play a non-conference game against someone like Texas A&M, or possibly, who else? University of Cincinnati. That would be within the same state. Cincinnati's available, and they're a top 15 team. So both very viable opponents, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
but non-conference again. If you're going to be hung up about, it's got to be within the conference, then you better play Indiana this weekend.
Right.
I don't give a damn that it's a repeat. Doesn't matter.
I just looked it up. Texas A&M has played 8 games, so they're 7-1 right now. And
Okay.
you're right. They don't have a game scheduled for this weekend, but they play the following weekend against Tennessee. That's their last game.
Okay. Got it. So yeah, so they're available. So I mean, if you want to argue that we're more deserving than Texas A&M, then let's have a game. Let's. I mean, and I think A&M would embrace that. Hell, they would want the opportunity. That's a way for them to win into the finals, right? Into the college football playoff. Why wouldn't they want that game, right?
Yeah, no, they would want the chance for
So
sure.
and I think Ohio State would embrace it too. I really do. I think that's the kind of coach Day is, and he
Right.
would be like, let's do this thing.
Well, right. And of course, when we talked about the whole situation with the Big Ten earlier this season, Ohio State was the other kind of vocal voice alongside Nebraska in terms of calling for the season. So, yeah, I think Day would definitely be open to whatever lets his boys play. He's probably game for that.
Right.
But it's not about him. It's about the athletic directors and the Big Ten brass,
Right.
really.
Well,
So,
yeah, and they're going to meet tomorrow. They have their regularly scheduled Wednesday meeting, the athletic directors apparently. And so I'm sure this is going to come up, and we might hear some news about at least some proposals, but they better make a damn decision soon. I don't know why they didn't meet today. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that as soon as the announcement was made that Michigan Ohio State wasn't going to happen, that they weren't already on the phone with each other having a conference call and considering options. And again, if these guys were behaving like leaders who were dynamically flexible during a changing environment like COVID, then we should already have a plan. And they're going to lose 24 hours, just like they did. They took 2 weeks that sucked up our ability to have any flexibility within our schedule, because it took them 2 weeks to make the right decision. Everybody, if they had made the decision to reinstate the football season when they did, we would have been able to start in late October, and we would have had 2 open weeks in our weekend. We would have still scheduled the same number of games as we've scheduled in this, but everybody would have actually probably been able to get, if not 8 games in, certainly 7 of the 8 games, because they would have had 2 weeks to flexibly adjust around COVID.
Right. Like other conferences have done.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. And just the whole flexibility of maybe playing a non-conference opponent, given the right set of circumstances. And if, it's just ridiculous. And now Quint, you said it at the beginning of this podcast, or near the beginning, the premier game of the year outside of their Big Ten championship game, from a television revenue and money-making standpoint, is what? The Ohio State Michigan game.
Yep.
And it's canceled. Right. So you think the television partners are happy about that? No, they are not. Okay. So, and now your second leading team in the Big Ten East, Indiana, may very well not be playing this weekend. So the 2 premier teams on the East side are not playing. Right.
Right.
Bad look. Horrible look for the Big Ten. You're idiots. Okay.
Yep. So, we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. This Wednesday meeting, like you said, it's a regularly scheduled meeting. But of course, this issue will almost certainly crop up. But to your point, they haven't shown themselves to be quick decision makers throughout this whole year. So we'll see what comes of that. I'm more, just from the Nebraska side of things, I'm more like, as you said, that we were supposed to figure out the 9th game by either Monday or Tuesday. And here we are, end of day Tuesday when we're recording this, and we still don't know. So these games are supposed to happen in a week and a half. So they really got to figure things out just for the logistics of the teams and everything.
Yeah. Hell yes.
Yeah.
See, I think that they must be still considering canceling it.
Oh, they definitely are.
I think it's probably 50-50 that they're going to come out sometime, maybe even later this week, and say, well, the 9th week's just not going to happen. We have enough COVID going on, and it's just the logistics were just too much to overcome, and so we're just going to pass, and we're just going to go ahead and look to the bowl games and our bowl game partnerships and try to get as many of our teams positioned well for those opportunities that we can.
Right.
And end of story.
Yep.
And we'll play our conference championship game and be done. But here's the thing. I love the way Nebraska has approached this from the very beginning. I don't think there was any visions of conference championships in Scott Frost or his staff's or anybody in our athletic department's vision of this year. They knew what they had. This was a developmental year. This was a year in which we were going to try to get better as a football team and to build our culture of winning. And we're trying to do that. And to do that, you need to play as many games as you can. And that's what we're doing. And I'm very proud of what they've done and the decisions they made and the positions they've taken throughout this whole deal, even though it has damaged our relationship with the Big Ten, because we had the gall to not toe the line and be the quiet, subservient child.
Right. Yep.
And now they know what they got in us. We are a team. We are a university that is going to always behave, especially on the athletic side, in a way that we think is in the best interest of our student athletes.
Yep.
It's what we're going to do.
Yep. Well, like you said, they know that now, and I know that we don't have much influence in the conference, being the newbies and all that, and kind of sucking in the time that we've been here. But we do still have that the money we bring in on TV, and the fans that travel and all that sort of stuff. So we do still have some leverage in that regard.
Well, and the fact that we've been able to maintain some of those significant contributions, even in light of 20 years of wandering in the desert, is a profound thing for the Big Ten to pay attention to, because what that means is that if we ever get our shit together and we become not the Nebraska of old, but we become a reasonably consistent competitor in the league, guess what that means to television revenues, national prominence, all that stuff. It goes through the roof, because let me tell you what, people will watch Nebraska if we become relevant again. A lot of non-Nebraska fans will watch Nebraska and be excited to see, well, this feels good, this feels right, because they grew up with Nebraska being relevant.
Right.
So I still think it's there.
Yeah, must be nice to grow up with Nebraska being relevant, huh?
Yeah, even though you didn't, I did.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry, son.
Yeah, thanks. So we're going to end this podcast here. A little bit of a longer one, but we got into some good discussion, and probably after next week, we'll dive more deep into the playoff discussion. I haven't been following that as closely, but we'll kind of be able to get more into that and the different conference championship lineups and all that fun stuff for next week. So that'll be an interesting podcast. And of course, we're getting close to that big 100, which we'll be in person for. So we'll do something special for that.
That sounds great. I love it.
All right. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. We always love hearing from the fans. You can also leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. And we always like hearing from everybody, and you can subscribe to us there. So thank you all very much for listening. Thank you for hosting with me, Dad. And until next week, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.